think right now in this season of my life, I'm choosing to be who I need to be for me, and that's giving me joy.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I don't know about you guys, but I am really happy that we are finally out of Mercury in retrograde. For me, it was a little bit brutal. It was a really intense, a little bit of insanity. If you're following me on Instagram, you know that my computer completely crashed last week. And I learned a big lesson, which is always back up your data. And I was convinced I lost like a bunch of future episodes and a bunch of other things that I needed, but a company near me was able to retrieve the data. So note to self, always back up your data. If there's one thing you can learn from me, definitely do that. Don't make the same mistake I did. So I would love to start off by talking a little bit about who is on the podcast this week. On the podcast is Emily Moberly, the CEO and founder of Traveling Stories. Traveling Stories is a nonprofit based out of San Diego, California, and their mission is to empower kids to outsmart poverty by providing the literacy and money management skills that they need to become productive members of society. And they really do this through their mobile StoryTent program, where they actually have kids come and read with a volunteer, and then for every book that they read, they earn a book buck, which they can then turn in for prizes. And I loved learning more about Traveling Stories and hearing Emily's story, and it's incredible the impact that this has really had on her life. And I loved learning about the inspiration behind Traveling Stories and how she's really overcome moments of self-doubt and burnout to really stay in it. You know, often we talk about what it takes to start a business, what it takes to start a blog, a podcast, whatever it might be, but we often don't talk about what it actually takes to stay in it. And so I really loved hearing Emily share what this process has been like for her. We also talk about setting up good boundaries and incorporating more self-care into your life, and it was just a fantastic conversation. I know you guys are going to love it. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about today's sponsor, Sudio. Sudio wants to revolutionize the way we see headphones, not just as a tech device, but also as an accessory. And you guys know that taking a walk is a staple in my self-care routine. And I've been using Sudio's headphones, the Regent in white, on my walks, and I am loving them. From the sound quality and clarity, Bluetooth compatibility, and sleek design, these headphones are officially joining my daily walking routine and have made listening to my favorite podcasts and music easy and fun. I would love for you guys to check out Sudio and their products. You can click on the link that's included in the show notes for today's episode. Plus, if you enter the discount code SEEKTHEJOY, all one word in caps, you will receive 15% off any purchase. And as always, you can learn more about today's episode and check out Sudio's headphones by visiting the show notes section of our website, seekthejoypodcast.com/show-notes, and everything is right there. Last thing, before we dive into today's episode, you know I have to share the iTunes review of the week. And this week it comes from Vicky4894, and it says, "Wonderful family and community. I absolutely love this podcast and recommend it to anyone. It allows for a safe space to talk about our struggles, hopes, and dreams, and feel connected to others that are going through the same struggles and who can relate. Love, love, love this community that Sydney has created and can't wait for it to grow." Vicky, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this kind review and for sharing your thoughts about Seek the Joy podcast with all of us. If you feel so inspired to leave us a rating and review on Apple iTunes, just send a screenshot of your review to Sydney at seekthejoypodcast.com, and I will send you my brand new guide for infusing more joy into your life, as well as a couple of limited edition Seek the Joy podcast stickers. All right, guys, I know that intro was a little bit long, but so much good stuff to share this week, and this episode is just So, so good. I know you're going to love it. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Emily.
My name is Emily Moberly, and I'm the founder and CEO over at Traveling Stories. Traveling Stories is a nonprofit that's based in San Diego, and our entire mission is about helping kids fall in love with reading by the 4th grade. And we believe that that's an incredible tool to empower kids to break the cycle of poverty. So I've been doing that for almost 8 years. We're turning 8 in May. And before that, I don't know, a book nerd who loved reading myself, and just saw how much that books and reading and knowledge could transform my life and, just give me an opportunity to kind of take a break from the day to day.
Yeah, the escapism part of reading, I think, is so fantastic. And I think as kids, I don't know, at least for myself, I never thought about how maybe other children in other parts of the world may not have access, to the same books or libraries or bookstores, that I really grew up in. So you start to really open up your eyes and understand, that this isn't something that everybody has. Was there a moment in time for you where like that clicked also? And what really inspired the start of Traveling Stories?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked, because I felt the same way. Growing up, I had a ton of books. I didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I had a lot of books, and my parents both read. So for me, I had like bedtime stories every night.
Yeah.
And I really took that for granted, and just thought that was how everyone experienced reading and life. And for me, it came kind of late when I realized that was special. It didn't happen for me until after college. After I graduated, I took a job teaching in Honduras, and I didn't find out till day one of my teaching job what grade I was teaching or what subjects. But I ended up getting juniors and seniors in high school, and I was teaching English and sociology. And I mean, it was an amazing experience, like very challenging. But I remember one day, just very, very distinctly, I had made my students write an essay. They thought I was evil. And so as they were writing their essay, it was a timed writing assignment. And I was sitting at my desk reading To Kill a Mockingbird, just one of the books that I had brought with me. One of my favorite books, I try to read it about every year. And one of my students finished her essay early. And so she brought it to the desk, turned it in, and noticed I was reading, and started making fun of me. And I'm like, who the heck is this 14-year-old making fun of me? And she was like, Miss, you could be doing anything. You could be texting. You could be, and I was like, oh my gosh, obviously you've never read this book. And I started to tell her about Atticus and Jem and Scout. And, for me, I felt like I was just telling her about my best friends. And before I knew it, the whole class was listening and just really intrigued, and they thought the story sounded amazing. And so when I finished telling them about it, I just asked them, I was like, hey, this could be like kind of a cool conversation. Like, why don't you guys share with me some of your favorite stories or your favorite books? And I had about 87 students spread out into different classes, and only like 1 or 2 of them could tell me about a favorite book. And the rest, like, sincerely confessed, they're like, we just haven't really read anything for fun. Like, all we ever read are textbooks. Like, we've never been tucked in with a bedtime story. Like, we don't have a library. We don't have bookstores. We don't have access to Dr. Seuss or like any of this stuff. And that was just very, very, very alarming for me, because I can't imagine my life or my childhood without books. And these students who I'd grown to really care about, they had grown 14, 15, 16 years without that at all. So I came home to San Diego for Christmas, and I just couldn't stop thinking about them. So I filled one of my suitcases with books from a used bookstore. I just, picked up everything I thought they might like. And I brought them back to my students and introduced these books as Miss Moberly's library. Mm-hmm. And at first, I made them read every day. It was almost like, elementary school or something. And we only had 2 rules. The kids, the rules were that they couldn't fall asleep during reading time, and they weren't allowed to read a book that they didn't enjoy. And they thought that was kind of funny. And I was like, no, this is like all about you finding books you like. So if you don't like it, give it a couple pages, but if you don't like it, then put it down and find another one. I purposely brought like tons of books. And so, within a couple weeks, I got to literally watch my students fall in love with reading for the first time. And I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it was really amazing. Like, it literally changed their life. It changed their attitudes about learning, about reading, about their future. It made them, just have a bigger idea of what they might want to do when they grow up. It made some of them change their mind about going to college or trade school. And fast forward a couple of years, like I still keep in touch with some of them, and some of them are having kids now, and they're like, "Hey, we're looking for kids' books because we want to read, to our baby, just like your mom read to you." And so, it just seemed like such I don't know, such an impactful thing. And it was so simple. All I did was share my love for reading with these kids and get books and make sure that they had access to them. And I sat there and cheerleaded, and helped them find a book that they really connected with, and gave them an opportunity to have like an enjoyable, relaxing reading environment. So I guess, it's not like I've always wanted to start a nonprofit. Like that definitely wasn't my life plan, but I don't know, my students in Honduras, like just seeing how much it changed their life, they really inspired me to think, how could I do this on a bigger scale, and how can I do this for more kids? And, so one thing led to another. And in 2010, I started the nonprofit. And so our initial focus was international. We built libraries. We would partner with schools and orphanages in other countries and communities where kids had never had access to books. And so we would partner and help open these little libraries. And that's really cool, like being in El Salvador and having kids pick up these books out of boxes and knowing that they've only seen 2 or 3 books in their whole life. And now they have, hundreds and thousands or maybe even thousands to pick from. And I remember actually, like when we were setting up the library, we actually I feel bad saying this, we actually had to kick the kids out so that we could finish like setting it up. But they were so excited that they just didn't want to leave.
What a confirmation though, like that you were doing the right thing in that moment, right? Just to see the excitement on their faces. That is so cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that, that was super, super, just like you said, confirming. And so we kept going with it and asking more people for books and for money and support. And then people started saying, it's so cool that you care about these other countries, but what about, what about kids here in the U.S.? And I was like, I don't know, don't kids here have books? Like I was just very naive and privileged. And so I started looking into the research, and I was really shocked to find that here in my own country, in my own city, kids are really struggling to read by the 4th grade. It's something like 2 out of 3 kids, no matter their economic background, 2 out of 3 kids are struggling to read proficiently by 4th grade. And then if you throw in like low income, it jumps to like 82% of kids, like 8 out of 10 kids. That's ridiculous. Yeah. And there's just so many studies that show that your ability to read is just tied to basically everything else. Your ability to have a job where you're getting paid well, your health, your mental health, your emotional health, your ability to engage with others, your social skills. Like reading really, 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 really has significant ties to all of that. And so if kids are missing out on that, if kids aren't reading, if they're not reading for fun, if they're not reading at all, if they can't read, it really stunts their ability for the rest of their life. And I just feel like that's not fair. No kid should know it's not their fault. And it's not that hard. Like I think what Honduras taught me is it's not rocket science. Getting somebody to read and getting them excited about it is not rocket science. And yet when you have that happen, it just unlocks so many doors, and it empowers somebody so much to really, 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 really make the rest of their life so much better.
Yeah, and you're making it available to them too, right? In a way that wasn't available to them before. And it has to be a total game changer. And I love just the trajectory that you've been on, and how, this experience in Honduras really set the stage for Traveling Stories. And I just love how you came home and everything that you've done. So with Traveling Stories, how does it work? Because I know there's like a real money management component to it also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm actually glad you asked that, because even though we started with like an international model and we focused on libraries, we've kind of shifted our focus based on research. And so now like our primary focus is here in the US, and our program model is something that we call the StoryTent. All it really is a 10-foot by 10-foot tent. If anyone listening has ever been to a farmer's market, it looks just like one of those tents. And so we literally set up this tent at farmers markets, at malls, at non-academic hotspots where families are hanging out. And we have carpets on the ground, we have bins full of books, we have prizes, we have volunteers. And so the way it works is kids come, voluntarily to the program. They check in. They pick out a book that looks cool to them, that looks interesting to them. There's no judgment. They literally can read like anything that they want. Granted, we make sure, there's nothing inappropriate. Um, and then, our volunteers are there and they are trained to really engage with kids. And so the kids pick out the books they like. They read one-on-one with a volunteer. And for every book that they read, the kids earn a book buck, which is just kind of like, Monopoly money. And we encourage kids to negotiate for more if the book's challenging. And so that kind of encourages a little more engagement as well. And then with their money, the kids can buy prizes. And we get all kinds of cool stuff. We have really inexpensive items like mechanical pencils for one book buck, all the way up to like a skateboard for 300, basketballs for like 25 or 50. We've got, sometimes we have gift cards. Sometimes we do field trips. Sometimes we do like movie tickets or, a pizza night for the whole family. And so, through it all, like, first of all, it helps because it's motivating kids, and our target are really reluctant readers. So kids who don't like reading, who don't think they know how, who just don't really see the value. So a lot of times we kind of trick kids into reading with the money and the prizes. But then over time, we find that, once they find a book that they like or find a few books they like, then they start to read a little bit more for pleasure, and the prizes become a secondary motivator. Right now we have 3 programs a week in San Diego. We have 3 satellite programs outside, and we're working with about 3,000 kids a year. And we're able to show how that program is helping them fall in love with reading and how it's helping in other parts of their life as well. But one of the things that I just really love about our program, I mean, it sounds really simple, right? It's just like a tent and books and fake money. But I think one of the things that makes it so special, 2 things that make it so special. One, it's not in an academic setting, so it's not a library, it's not a school. And everyone's always like, wait, what? Why don't you do it at school? And I have nothing against doing programs at school. It's just that there's already programs at school. And so we wanted to fill, a need that wasn't being met yet. And it's also really cool, like, because we're set up at a place where you least expect to find, learning maybe. I find that it really kind of transforms, it just kind of like changes the way kids look at reading, because if they're going to tutoring, it's like, oh crap, like I'm not very good at reading, I have to get help, or this is something I have to do. But because we're at this fun setting that's just kind of totally voluntary, kids are choosing to be there, and it just changes the whole feel. I think the other big thing is just kind of going off on that, the voluntary part. And there's also, we've been reading a lot of studies recently about, the difference between compulsive reading, where you're kind of told what to read and how to read and when to read, like that's kind of what school is like. And there's a lot of value to that. But then there's new research that's showing voluntary reading and reading for just like reading, like self-directed reading, and how there's a lot of benefit to that as well. And so I'm really proud of our program model because it makes it easy for kids, even if they're like 3 years old, to really direct themselves and pick out books that they like and read how they want to read and read when they want to read. And because kids really like it, they're coming back week after week after week. So I don't know, that's kind of what we're doing now. We've got 350 volunteers, and we're really, really working hard to expand to new locations and new malls and shopping centers and farmers markets so that we can help more kids.
I love this. I think, what it sounds like to me? It sounds like over time, you're really helping them or helping these kids build their self-confidence around reading.
Yes.
And then also with themselves. I think if you feel like you can't read and everyone else around you is, I think it starts to wear on your self-confidence and your self-esteem, and you start to feel like, well, I'll never be able to do this. And so you're really changing that narrative for them through your program.
Absolutely. We have a little boy named Jamal who's like such a sweetheart, and he comes to the StoryTent almost every Saturday in his neighborhood. And so in some of our neighborhoods, it's kind of an underserved community. So a lot of the families might be considered low income, they might be receiving assistance. And so this particular little boy reads a ton. He's becoming really good at reading. And I noticed that he had a giant stack of book bucks in his hand. Like, I'm talking hundreds. And so I was like, Jamal, what's going on? Like, this is awesome. You're saving so much. I'm like so proud. And, it's kind of unusual because a lot of times the kids spend their money really fast. And so I'm like, what are you saving up for? And, do we have cool enough prizes? Like, what kind of prizes would you like? Do you have any special requests? And Jamal looked down at his shoe, and I noticed that there was a piece of tape covering a hole over his toe.
Mm.
And he looked back up at me and he was like, it'd be really cool if I could use my book bucks to buy some new shoes. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Like,
Mm.
like why is this 8-year-old worried about whatever, like he's been saving all this money. He's not
Right.
going to buy like a scooter. He wants to buy shoes. Like,
Right.
and I was really tempted to just run down to Payless and like buy some shoes for him. But then I would be the hero, and I would be the person who fixed it. So instead we got a gift card to a shoe store. We put it in the prize bin the next week. Jamal used his money and bought it. He went shopping, picked out the shoes he wanted. I think they had like lights on them or something. And he came back the next week, he was wearing them. And I swear, like he actually had kind of a different strut, like he was definitely walking with more swag and like was more confident. And his mom said that he had just been running around everywhere and like just super excited to wear them to school and to show all his friends. And I think for me, that was like a really eye-opening moment because I realized what you just said, it's not just literacy, but it's confidence, and it's showing kids that they have the ability to do something and the ability to follow through, and giving them that firsthand experience of, what it feels like to work hard and to earn and to take care of yourself and to not, rely on handouts and not be a charity case. Like,
right.
It doesn't, this kid was able to take care of himself, and it showed, it showed that, I don't know, he was just so proud. So for me, that was a huge moment. And sometimes, on hard days, I think back to that story and other stories like it, just to be like, nope, this is good. We got to keep going. We got to keep helping.
Because you can see the impact in real time, which I think is what is so powerful and empowering about the work that you're doing, is that you can really see the way these kids change the way they think about themselves, really in this moment. So kind of having this perspective of seeing it in real time and seeing where you've started out and ended up now in 8 years, which is incredible. What do you feel like you've learned the most about yourself kind of going through this?
That's an interesting question. I feel like, oh man, it's been so interesting. The first 5 years I was working full time doing something else because Traveling Stories wasn't big enough to pay me yet. And so like that was a whole different phase, of just being exhausted all the time, working 40, 50 hours and then spending nights and weekends building Traveling Stories. And then like the next phase though was, getting hired on and then starting to build my team. So, like 8 years ago, it was me, my mom, like 1 or 2 programs and like 50 kids. Now we have 4 paid staff, 350 volunteers. We've got 14 programs worldwide where we're, thousands of kids. And it's been interesting, to see how the responsibilities change and how the demands change. So to be completely honest, I feel like one of the things I've learned or I've struggled with is, it's one thing to come up with an idea and to start a company or to start a nonprofit. At the beginning, I feel like it was super exciting and you're trying all these new things. And I don't know, last year, to be completely honest, was just a real struggle. And I feel like what I started kind of facing is it's one thing to start an idea, but how do you sustain it? And how do you sustain a passion, especially when your work and your passion are lined up, and for me, like I noticed last year that a lot of people started referring to me as just like, oh, you're that book lady, you're the Traveling Stories lady. And I had put so much of my time and energy into building Traveling Stories that had become 100% of like who I was. And I started realizing like I was losing sight of the fact that I'm not just Traveling Stories, like I have another identity, and that's a valuable identity as well. And that my identity doesn't come through work. And so when because what was happening is like, I was working really, really hard and burning myself out and not, setting these huge goals for myself and then not reaching them and feeling like a failure. And because so much of my life revolved around Traveling Stories, I just really felt like I was a failure as a person because there wasn't a distinction kind of, between work and my personal life or between myself and work.
Right. It was your full identity at that point.
Yeah, it was. And that's not good. That's not healthy. Like, even if it's for a good cause, it's not healthy, right? Like, I'm not the cause. So last year was like such a very interesting experience because it really, really pushed me. And what I ultimately realized was, this is not my identity. For one, I'm much more than just what I created. I'm much more than just this idea. And second of all, by trying to do everything for Traveling Stories, I was actually holding Traveling Stories back. So, for so many years, I had to wear all the hats, but Traveling Stories had grown to a point where that was impossible for me to wear all the hats, and still continue to grow. And I didn't want to hurt Traveling Stories. So it was a really good wake up call because I didn't want to be the reason that my organization couldn't grow farther, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't want to be the thing that was holding it back. And so what I kind of learned was, I knew cognitively that I needed to delegate, but last year just feeling super overwhelmed and nearly burning out really showed me, hey, like you're not doing anyone favors by trying to do it all yourself. So I just learned, I need to let go and I need to find people that I can trust. And that the only way to grow beyond myself is to include those other people, and to empower them and to free their own ideas, and so I'm really fortunate that once I figured that out, that my board of directors were supportive, and together we worked to find, some team members who could join our team and kind of help in areas that I wasn't very strong at. I think that the other thing that was really interesting, I was so used to doing everything, and it sounds kind of lame, but like growing up, I was an overachiever. So I was just used to being good at a lot of stuff and good at running a lot of parts of the Traveling Stories. And last year, I just really came to terms, or was forced to come to terms with some of my weaknesses and the ways that those weaknesses were holding us back. And so I think another thing I've been learning a lot lately is just to really take time to pay attention to what your strengths are and to develop, spend as much time developing those and find other people who are good at the stuff that you're not good at instead of trying to be good at everything,
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's been very freeing and I feel so much better about everything. And Traveling Stories is growing. Like it's crazy. We have like 2 or 3 programs starting in the next 2 months. And that wouldn't be possible if we hadn't made that shift, and if I hadn't kind of just let go a little bit.
It's interesting. I think there's almost this perfectionist quality in that, where especially when you start out and you're wearing every hat, and I can totally relate to that. You're doing everything and you want to make sure it's perfect or it looks great or it meets, your internal standard, right? Yeah, and then it's
absolutely.
Like that process of learning to let go and learning that it's okay for someone to help you, or if there's somebody who's an expert in that, for them to come on board. So it sounds like you really spent all of last year really learning how to do that.
Yeah. You know what? One thing that really helped me, like I came to a point where I was just so exhausted. Like I literally, I just like couldn't move. I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't do anything. And what I eventually did was, and it sounds kind of tedious, but I made a list of everything that I spent time doing. Like just this long list of, everything from like emails to grant writing to filing to like fixing the printer to, whatever. And then I like circled everything that I just really don't like doing. And I highlighted everything that I love doing. And I was shocked to find like most of my list was stuff I didn't like,
Yeah.
And so I decided right then, I was like, this is not going to work for me. Like I created this job. Why am I doing it? Why am I allowing myself to do a role that like I suck at and that I don't really like? So I started then like focusing on the things I highlighted, the things I love doing and the things I thought I was good at. And I started rebuilding my role in Traveling Stories around that and making sure that I spent more time doing those things. And then I looked for team members who were really good at those other things that I hate doing. And they're excited, they're like, yeah, I love doing this, this, and this. I'm like, fantastic, because I hate it. Like, that's just, it just drives me insane. And I get to spend more time doing the things that I really love. And I feel like, it sounds super common sense, but it took me a while to figure it out. So, but I just share it in case anyone else, might be able to benefit from it. Because I don't know if there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening, but I feel like we put so much emphasis into starting a venture. And then inevitably, if we're successful, we're going to have growing pains and what we create is going to change over time. And I think it's important to identify that we need to allow our role within our business to change over time too. And it's okay to do things that we like, we don't like, I think I kind of felt like I had to do a lot of stuff I didn't like because that was like the important stuff or whatever. Yeah. It's like, oh, this was just part of it. And I still have to do stuff I don't, but I make sure that at least half of what I'm doing is stuff that I like really love.
I think that tip too about making that list is really valuable. I think to really sit down and understand and write out everything that you're actually doing, every day. It's a really great way to take stock. So in addition to sort of making that list last year, were there any other like practices or resources or things that you relied on to really, well,
Hmm.
A, help yourself come back from this burnout or prevent yourself from totally burning out. And then I guess
Yeah.
also, you know, you touched on this at the beginning of this part of our conversation about we put so much emphasis on starting, but not so much on staying in it. So were there
Yeah.
other practices or things that you did that really helped you to stay in it? Because I think that's a really valuable thing that not too many
Yeah.
people, just like you said, talk about.
I know. I was looking for books. I'm like, I found so many books about how to start or how to figure out your dream job or how to, and I was like, but how do I sustain it? So,
Right.
so maybe I'll write one someday. But I do feel like, so one of the things I did, I took a vacation. So I highly recommend that. And
Hmm.
I told my team, I was like, don't call me and I don't care if like the building burns down. Like I can deal with it when I come back. So
I
I
have
really
my
just,
permanent away message on. Talk to me
yes,
later.
exactly. I was like, honestly, like, and so really, really unplugging. And for
Yeah.
me, I went to Paris, which is like one of my favorite places in
Uh,
the whole world. And I know that sounds bougie, but my dad was like, you're feeling burned out, so you're going to go to Paris? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, wow, lucky, it must be nice. But my whole purpose was, I wanted to get in touch with the identity with myself outside of traveling stories. And I
yeah.
wanted to be inspired by something outside of work. And so like I took time and I unplugged from work. And then I just, I don't know, I looked at art, I read fiction, I just like spent time like really feeding my soul. I can't believe I didn't do this sooner, but I just started setting more boundaries. So, I used to be reachable pretty much 7 days a week. And I work with a lot of volunteers and a lot of interns. And so sometimes their availability is like the nighttime and
Yeah.
weekends. And so I wanted to be there for them and I wanted to appreciate their efforts. But, after all of this was happening, I just decided, you know what? No, like Sundays, I'm off the grid. Nighttime, I'm off the grid. Like if it can't get done, within these hours, then it's just
Hmm.
not meant to be. And granted, I would say at the beginning, that's probably not feasible. Like,
Right.
you know, at the beginning, I really did have to hustle all the time, but I do think that it's important, to create some boundaries and maybe even I communicated it with my team too. I said, like if I don't respond, it's not because I hate you. I'm just building like more of a work-life balance and actually they kind of responded. They were like, it's cool that you're sharing this because it sets a good tone and a good example for us. Like we should be figuring that out too. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to burn out, like let's
Right.
all figure out like what our sustainability pattern is and just unplugging, taking a vacation, really investing in other parts of my life that weren't related to work, setting more boundaries, not feeling guilty for unplugging. And it's kind of weird and annoying, but people will hear about what my job is and they're like, wow, that's awesome. It must just be like floating on a cloud, 7 days a week because you get to, all you get to do is like inspire kids to read. And like on one hand, yeah, it's awesome, and most of the time it is really cool and inspiring, but then sometimes it sucks and it's hard and it's still work. So I used to feel guilty about, not doing work stuff or not being available. And I don't feel guilty anymore. You just can't be on all the time. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter, I don't know, your business, like you're not doing your business any favors by giving it your attention 24/7. I don't
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. And then I read a book. I highly recommend it. It's called Quiet. And it's a little bit about your personality and like introverts and extroverts and kind of, just how that affects like your ability to work and how you might need rest here and there. I don't know. It just was really helpful for me to learn more about my own personality and why I was feeling burned out and why one of the things it talks about is if you're an introvert, you might need more time to recharge. But if you're talking about a passion project, then you can kind of become an extrovert. And so
Yeah.
you don't realize, how worn out you're getting because you just love talking about what you're talking about and you love socializing and
Hmm.
because it's something you really care about. But then at the end of it, you're going to be just as exhausted. But I was like, oh my gosh, that's totally me. Like, because I love being out and about and I love sharing about traveling stories. But why do I feel, like if I'm at an event all night, I just like, I need like a day in bed to recharge. And I'm like, this can't be
Yeah.
like, why is this happening? So reading that book really helped me understand more about myself and made me feel less guilty and made me feel more understood and made me realize that I needed to kind of change some of my patterns and build in some of that, those boundaries. Because
Yeah.
I mean, it all comes back to I want traveling stories to have the best of me and I want to help it as much as I can, just learning to take care of myself better so I could do a better job,
Yeah.
really.
That self-care component is So crucial, and I think it's interesting because especially when you're, just starting something or you're really in the middle of it, you think that it means it demands all of your attention, whether that means
Yeah.
you're on email all day, on call all day, juggling, 20 different hats, whatever that might look like. You think, that's what that means, that it really does demand all of you. But in order for you to really do the best job in that moment, you have to take better care of yourself. So now, do you still implement those same practices
Oh my gosh,
for
yes,
self-care?
I would die if I didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
that was only a few months ago, right? So I'm still kind of coming out of it. I don't feel 100% yet, but I'm getting there. So yeah, I mean, and you know what else I've started doing? So that vacation was incredible. And so what I decided is at least every quarter, I need to take some time away. It may not be a whole week, it might just be like a couple days. So I recently booked a trip in May where I'm going to be gone for a week and I'm going to be off the grid. And you know what else though is kind of cool about that is when I take a step back, it allows my team to really step up, and it kind of allows us to test and see where our systems are weak and where we're relying on me too much. So it's good for me to take that break, but it's also good for my team and for our systems because it allows us to build better ones.
Yeah, that balance.
Yeah.
It's important to really have it. In setting these good boundaries for yourself, along the way, and in just creating traveling stories to begin with, do you feel like you've stepped more into your voice or grown your voice more in doing so? Because I do think it takes like a real self-assurance in some ways to be able to set those kind of boundaries and to feel confident in doing that. So I'd be curious to know, do you feel like you own your voice more or that you've grown it more through just this 8-year journey that you've been on?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I still have a ways to go, like I'm still definitely insecure at times and, unsure. And I definitely have to like give myself pep talks and things like that and face my doubts. And one of my favorite parts about my role at Traveling Stories and just what this 8 years has been more than any other job, Traveling Stories has really allowed me to use all of my skills and to feel like I'm in over my head to the point where I feel like I want to learn and get better. So, I've had other jobs where they used, some of my skills, but not all of them. And Traveling Stories needs all my skills and even more. And so being in that position, I think has really stretched me and given me a chance to like a safe environment to explore what my strengths are and to fail and to try. And I don't know. I mean, like I'm fortunate that there's some people that supported me even early on so that even when I did fail or if I felt foolish, they would encourage me and be that positive voice. Seeing the impact of the organization. And I think one of the most powerful things for me personally is to see how our team has grown, like from me and my mom. My mom's kind of obligated, right? Because she loves me. But now there's people who are involved who don't know me and they don't love, they don't have to love me. And, like we have people who've written us into their will. We've had people donate lots of money. We have people who give lots of time. And it's not because of me. It's because they believe in what we're doing and they see the impact. Yeah. And for me, that's like the biggest thing. And I think probably for me, the most empowering thing that makes me want to stand up and talk about what we're doing and to do interviews and to really like, it's not about me. And that's the part that I think allows me to have a voice about it. Because my voice is reflecting this group and it's reflecting this overall idea. It's not a voice that's about me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's interesting, what you were just talking about too, how even at the beginning in moments where you might have fallen or failed or things don't go the right way, you had people in your life who were encouraging you and were that positive voice to help you keep going. And it's interesting. I think we all really obviously need that. And then I sort of found it's become really important for me to learn how to become that encouraging and positive voice for myself too. So to like give myself that pep talk that you were talking about too, to really become the person that I can lean on. Have you been able to do that for yourself too a lot more along the way?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, it always goes back to the impact. I'm really lucky that there are literally at least 3 story tents a week that I can go visit and see firsthand how all of this work is helping kids and their families. And I don't know, like the whole reason I do this is to have impact. If we're not having impact, then screw it, let's shut down. So the thing that kind of motivates me the most and gives me the most confidence is visiting the program and just seeing again firsthand the magic that's happening. I believe in that, so I see the impact, I believe the impact, and that motivates me to get over any hurdles or insecurities. If I didn't believe in it, it would be a lot harder. Or if I couldn't see the impact, it would be a
Yeah.
lot harder.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm really lucky because the families that we serve, they're very encouraging. And so, they'll frequently like stop me and say, thank you. Or I've known some of them for 7, 8 years now. And, and they care about me, not just as a traveling stories person, but as a human. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've gotten so much out of, we talk about the impact that we have on kids, but I'm just thinking back to all the impact I've had personally and how they've helped me grow and encourage me. I know one time, like at a StoryTent, we had a parent, this little kid was stealing toys. And so I had to kind of reprimand her. And then the mom got mad at me and like yelled at me. And then the kid's crying. It was just this dramatic thing. And a couple other parents came up to me afterward and they were like, don't worry about her. Like, we see you every week. We know what you're here for. We know that you care about the kids. We know that you're not, trying to cheat some kid out of a toy. Like
Yeah.
we're here. If you need anything, we have your back. And to be part of that, I don't know, I'm digressing, but that's it, and I guess for me, I just personally have to be able to connect with the mission and the impact. And if I wasn't able to do that, I definitely would have given up a long time ago.
Yeah, it sounds like that connection and reminding yourself of who you are and why you started and
Yep.
why you're doing
Yeah,
what you're doing has really helped you bounce back every time. And then to
absolutely.
really cultivate this community around you.
Yep.
I'd love to,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that role of community and the way also that
Yeah.
families are involved, in the work that you're doing. What role has community had in your life? How has it impacted you? And when you think of community, what comes to mind?
Well, that's an interesting question. I feel like my idea of community, like as an individual, has been a little weird. I've always been kind of a introverted, quiet kid. I was homeschooled, so I didn't have a ton of friends. So like for me, my first community was probably the books that I read, which is, kind of a weird, now that I think about it, that's kind of weird. Like my community are these fictional characters that are living in my head and on pages in a book. But I think because of that, my community was able to be, international and multi decades and this weird, very kind of broad sense, which I think opened up my eyes later. And one thing that I got to do in college is study abroad in Uganda, where I studied community development. So that was another very impactful experience for me related to community, where I got to kind of visit these different NGOs across Uganda and experience how they were working with locals to do good and to empower people. And so I saw two different ways of doing it. I saw these groups that would come to Uganda and tell everyone what they needed to do. And then they would kind of like just say like, hey, we're here to save you and you need to do X, Y, and Z. And, you have to adopt our way of doing this. And then the other side, the other group of people were kind of like, we're not here to save you. Like, who are we to save you? Like, we're here to learn from you and we're here to share what we know. We want to learn about your customs and we want to see how our knowledge can fit in so that we can create like a sustainable, better solution,
Yeah.
And so seeing both of those examples firsthand really, really impacted me and played a big role in how I design traveling stories. And so at Traveling Stories, our mentality is, that second one where, we're not here to save anybody. Like, who are we? Like, we might know a few things, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And so in our international programs and in our local programs, we're working with a ton of different cultures and languages and religions. And that's created like a really beautiful community for us where it's not always easy and sometimes there's funny misunderstandings, but I think it's shown me that no matter, there's certain things that can really unify people. And one of those things I think is just caring for children and wanting children to have every opportunity they can. So, whether it's our international programs or our story tents here, we're working with parents from the Middle East, from Asia, from Central America, from Africa, and these parents speak different languages. Some of their religions don't get along, but they all want their kids to learn. They all want their kids to read. They all want their kids to have the best. And so we find this beautiful sense of community at our programs where people put their differences aside because the goal is more important to us and children are more important to us.
Yeah.
And I think, because we kind of set that tone of, hey, we're here to learn from you and we're here to help in whatever way we can as partners, that tone just kind of transcends to everyone. And so there's this real beautiful sense of humility where we try to put our egos aside and we try to do what's best for the community. And I think, for me, I see that community is kind of, thinking of us as opposed to me, and putting like egos aside and just recognizing that we all have something to contribute. I don't know. It's just really beautiful. You see like, oh, there's this adorable little girl named Rukia who's originally from Africa, and she's like 4 years old now, and just precious. And one of our volunteers had a baby recently, and she brought her little baby, and just like this little white baby, and Rukia just fell in love with her and like went right toward the baby and started picking her up and like picking out books to read to her. And it's just like, I don't know. I love it. I love that at our program, we're all about reading and having fun. And it doesn't matter, what color you are, what religion you are, what language you speak. We're all different. I think that's the one thing that we have in common is like we don't fit in, but here at our programs we do, because we all don't fit in other places, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's also about that commonality that you were talking about with caring for children and wanting to make sure that they can succeed and have access to books and materials to guarantee, that success. And then also, wanting to really foster that love of reading independent from like a school environment.
Yeah.
So I love how those commonalities really transcend every community, that you've really been part of.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you a little bit about joy in your life.
Yeah.
What does joy look like in your life now? And, incorporating that balance, what are some things that you do to bring yourself joy?
That's a great question. For me right now, joy looks like sleeping through the night, not waking up at 3 a.m. freaked out about work. Joy looks like, not feeling anxious. Joy feels like, just knowing without a doubt that what I'm doing is good, is having a good impact. And joy also, I don't know, is like letting go. It's relaxing, it's saying, I'm not going to handle this because I'm going to trust that my team member is going to handle it. And then the team member handles it. It's like, wow, yay, that's awesome. Like, it worked out. And now they're more empowered and I'm able to focus on other things. It's a constant choice, I think, for me. Like, I have to choose joy. It doesn't happen. I have to choose it. I have to look for it. It'd be easy to just be upset that I can't sleep through the night, 3 nights out of the week instead of being grateful for the 4 nights that I do. And
shifting your perspective that way.
Absolutely. And I think too, I have been building more time to rest and recharge. And I think like accepting that and not feeling like I'm lame, St. Patrick's Day, I didn't go out. Like I stayed home and watched a movie with my cat and I was so like joyful. Like that was amazing, and just accepting that and saying, hey, maybe all my other friends are going out and partying and that's cool for them. But like for me, this is what joy looks like. And I'm choosing that.
Staying true to yourself in those moments too,
I think right now in this season of my life, I'm choosing to be who I need to be for me. And that's giving me joy.
Choosing to be who you want to be for yourself.
Yeah.
That's such a common theme really throughout almost pretty much every conversation I've had. So it's wonderful to keep hearing that. I think it's a really wonderful confirmation for people.
Thank you.
Okay. So favorite book.
Oh man. Gosh, that's really hard. It's like picking, I don't have kids, but I feel like it'd be like picking my favorite kid. It depends. Like as a kid, I loved the Clifford, the big red dog. The character's name is Emily Elizabeth, just like me. I love Nancy Drew. She's literally my best friend. I loved Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know. Those are some of my favorites, but I always I love reading. I've been building more time into my schedule to read for fun. And I love young adult like fantasy fiction, which I feel like I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but it's so entertaining.
I love it. I love how it's so, there's a huge variety and you can come back to the ones that you've loved, over time too and read them again. Do you have a favorite quote?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a few that I go back to, but there's one, I think it's Victor Hugo, to learn to read is to light a fire. I'm probably butchering it, but I love that. And I feel like that inspired me a lot when I first started traveling stories because, it's totally what happens. Like to help a kid fall in love with reading, to help them learn to read, you are lighting a fire and who knows where that's going to go.
It feels like the mission behind traveling stories, honestly. Yeah, fits perfectly. So I'm going to ask you the question that I ask everybody who comes on Seek the Joy podcast. What is your biggest dream?
I have two. Can I share my work dream and my personal dream?
Yes, please.
Okay. My work dream for Traveling Stories is to grow just giant, right? So that we have story tents in every community across the United States and eventually maybe the world, and to really put ourselves out of business. So I would love it if every kid in the United States was reading and fell in love with reading and didn't need us anymore.
Yeah.
And for it just to be like, oh, Traveling Stories, yeah, I know them. Or like, I take my kids there, no matter where you're at, Michigan, San Diego, New York. And then my personal dream is, as a kid, one of my favorite books was Joe's Boys by Louisa May Alcott. And I don't know if it was that book or just multiple, tons of different things, but I really, really, really want to either be a foster parent or to adopt. And I just my heart breaks when I think about all the kids who don't have families and homes, and just thinking about the situation that so many kids are in, and it's not their fault, they're just inheriting the situation that they had no control over. And I don't know, I was loved so much. My parents loved me so much. They had such a great childhood, and it makes me really sad to think that so many kids don't. And so my dream is be in a position where I can either foster kids or adopt kids and actually give them a good life. So I might need to make a little more money first, but that's my dream. I'm really happy with what Traveling Stories is doing. But if I were to die, like next year or 5 years from now, and I never pursued this dream of either foster or adoption, I think that would be my biggest regret.
Yeah. Oh, I love this.
So we'll see.
Emily, I have loved having this conversation with you.
Oh, me too.
Learning more about you and Traveling Stories. So where can everyone find you and learn more and get involved? TravelingStories.org. So feel free to come there and check us out. We're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Traveling Stories as well. If you search, I think you'll be able to find us. And if you're in San Diego, definitely consider volunteering. It's super rewarding getting to read with kids. And if you're not in San Diego, one thing I'm really proud of is how far money goes in our program. So $5 provides our StoryTent program for a whole month for one kid. Wow.
That's ridiculous, wow. I think. That's like my honey latte.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we have on our website, and that we have this little program called Reading Warriors. And these are people who give $5 or more every month. And it's kind of like sponsoring a kid, so that your $5 is going to help this child have one-on-one reading support every week for that month. So if there's anyone out there who's like, hey, I can spare $5 and I'd love to help a kid, and maybe you can't volunteer in person, definitely consider it. I started at $5 and didn't miss it and was able to increase it, every year a little bit. And I feel really good when I get the little notification that says hey, your donation to Traveling Stories went through. And, I get to spend time and help kids, but it also feels really good to know that a little bit of money every month is helping these kids. And not only does it pay for the program, but it kind of communicates to them, hey, I believe in you. And I believe in you enough to put some of my money on you. So we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or want to figure out a way to get involved, or you want to maybe try to start a story tent in your neighborhood, we've got some tools that we can provide.